Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3767. Today's date is December 19, 2025. It's been almost like morning at 8:23 a.m. Alright, I am kind of like sitting on the rooftop. Very cold, yeah. But I'm kind of like sucking up the little bit sun. Okay, one part of the body is kind of like get little warm. One part of the body is not actually getting that much warm. Yeah, it's actually kind of like a problem in winter. Yeah, whatever. Let's just jump into the question. All right. Yeah. All right. The question is, what if internet was a physical place? Okay, that's a really good question. All right. Yeah. First of all, what is this question, and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question is always a really interested way to you the answer. It kind of like a force you to think about that reality. When I try to think about that reality, or when I try to create that reality, I'm kind of like utilizing my knowledge and information and experience that I've been through. And somehow it kind of like simply felt really good while I was doing it, that while I was kind of like utilizing my knowledge and experience and things like that. Disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It's a raw, it's unfiltered, it's just my opinion. So do not believe in any kind of like information that I am saying, or do not seek for any kind of like information that I am saying. It's just my opinion, and opinion are subjective. Now regarding about the question says that ki, what if internet was a physical place? Okay, yeah. Now, usually when I think about this particular example, when I particular think about this particular question, there is a only one kind of like a sort of thing is actually wrap up in my head. Okay, a couple of year ago, I watched a movie named um, Raf Break the Internet. Okay, Raf the Break the. It's an animated movie, by the way. Okay, yeah. In this animated movie, Raf is a kind of like a game character. Okay, yeah. By the way, this movie is kind of like a tell a story regarding about the kind of like how the internet and how the kind of like a mobile phone would kind of like look like that. It kind of like a tell us like it's animated version, but in this particular movie they kind of like explain how the YouTube sees in the physical world, how the Instagram or how does Twitter or how does kind of like other social platform are kind of like a scene physically, music, Spotify, Facebook, Google search, Dropbox, Gmail. There are so many things they kind of like a showcase in that particular movie in a such a way that kind of like a felt kind of like a somebody feels like that internet or mobile phone kind of like a something a physical world, and they kind of like a somebody animated from that point of perspective, and it felt like wow. Okay, yeah. Like basically as a user, as a we are human, we actually kind of like experience this thing as a kind of like a something a digital world. But what if we could kind of like simply went into that digital world and kind of like simply experience everything and stuff like that. So Raf Break the Internet. This is one movie, and there is also another movie named Emoji. Okay, yeah. Emoji is also kind of like a sort of movie, kind of like a tell us the same perspective regarding about how the internet would be kind of like a sort of physical world, then how it should supposed to be, and like how it kind of like assembly how it thinks. It kind of like assembly tell us regarding about same concept. Okay, yeah. So I just try to kind of like replicate that thought process. Okay, yeah. So let's just imagine that a kind of like a something that okay, you are in the particular let's just say you are in a home screen, in your phone home screen. Okay, yeah. Right now I'm kind of like imagine that scene. Okay, yeah. You are in the home screen, and from your point of perspective you are actually seeing the multiples of kind of like actually blocks. Okay, yeah. And there are so many blocks that probably you can't even went there, like it's a far ahead, far behind and things like that. And each blocks are kind of like so big and so massive. Okay, yeah. So let's just say you are kind of like a something at you are kind of like a near to a kind of like a red block. Okay, yeah. And you are bitly curious about what is actually that red block, and then you kind of like a went inside that red block, and suddenly you are kind of like a went into the YouTube. Okay, yeah. In the YouTube there are almost like a millions of videos are playing at the same time and things like that, and you was kind of like some very confused and things like that. Okay, yeah. There is a kind of like ads or pop up. Okay, that kind of like a simply showcase that ki, would you like these shoes, this is kind of like a simply very cheaper and things and that you are kind of like simply I don't want it, but still that advertise came again and again, it kind of like a bother you. Okay, another thing is that in the YouTube there are so many videos. Okay, yeah. You just wanted to watch the video, and when you play the video the entire experience is kind of like a feel really massive, like basically you just kind of like a feel like that ki you are in the theater, because the screen is so big that you just kind of completely feel like immersed into that particular screen. Okay, yeah, you spend almost like hours into that kind of like a watch funny videos and cats and things like that. There is also one thing is that ki you cannot able to kind of like a somebody scroll the reel or scroll the shorts. Why? Because of that your hand cannot able to be reached, but still you can kind of like a feel that particular video screen and stuff like that. You might gonna kind of like a scroll, or maybe I don't know how do you supposed to scroll, like you are as your size as compared to the screen is very tiny, but still you kind of like somebody scroll maybe. Yeah, you are kind of like a bit really addicted and things like that. Okay, yeah. So you are kind of like a wanted to spend almost like a maybe 1 or 2 minute, but somehow you spend almost like an hour and a half to kind of like in that particular application, and you just kind of like lost at everything. And then you realize that, oh no no no, I have to be go somewhere else. So you just kind of like exit from that block. Okay, and then suddenly there is a kind of like somebody green block are in front of you, and you just kind of like somebody unaware of that ki what is actually that green block. So you just went there and suddenly you went into the Spotify. Okay, yeah. And when you went to the Spotify, suddenly the music is actually playing loud, like every kind of like a music, classic or kind of like a pop up or any kind of like a some the EDM or things like that. Okay, yeah. First of all, it kind of like simply verify you. Like I never really went directly into the homepage. Like first of all, it kind of like shows me, okay, I sign in with the Google. I click the Google, then kind of like a sign. It kind of like a shows me password and things and that and that. I'm kind of like a putting the password and things like that. Okay, and then it kind of like a let me in, and when I kind of like a when I kind of like a get inside the Spotify, it's kind of like a somebody is this thing that key I just drop into the kind of like a somebody river, but it's not a kind of like a river of water. It's a kind of like a somebody river of music. Okay, yeah. And when you kind of like a tap on that river, there is a kind of like a some sort of sound is kind of like somebody came out when you tap out that kind of like somebody water. And every time I kind of like a tap on that water or things like that, it kind of like a somebody show is kind of like a um, giving me very different audio tones and things like that. Okay, then I try to kind of like somebody merge the entire sound, kind of like somebody just like doing chaos in these particular things, then kind of suddenly all the sounds and things are kind of like a pop-up, which kind of like a feel really amazing at the moment. Then suddenly a lot of music is actually happened, which is kind of like a really good, really great. There are so many kind of like assembly music is actually happening. And then suddenly ads are actually pop up. The ads are saying that ki you can experience this unlimited break free audio by kind of like a clicking here and buy the kind of like a premium Spotify. It will kind of like a somebody cost you 50% less than original price and things and that, and it's just like fuck off. Okay, you are kind of like a finding that cross button, that where should I supposed to be fuck off that sales manager, but suddenly another person, another kind of like a things, you are kind of like a playing the music which kind of like a feels really good and things like that, and suddenly advertisement pop and it says same thing that if you wanted to experiencing this kind of like a really good song, then you just have to kind of like a buy and this subscription, which kind of like a fools, it kind of like a bit really annoying and things like that. But after some sort of time I just like a really fucked up and just like fuck off, and you kind of like get off that kind of like a somebody green zone. Okay, the green block. Okay, and then you kind of like somebody found out that in front of you there is a kind of like a somebody that red or kind of like a somebody the red or orange or kind of like a pinkish kind of like a somebody the blocks. Okay, it's a kind of like a mixture of all those colors. Okay, you never know what exactly is this thing. Then you kind of like went inside that particular block, and suddenly there is an Instagram. Oh my god. Okay, yeah. And when you went to the Instagram, there are so many people who are kind of like saying, oh, this actually happened, and this and that, and kind of like every bit of influencer kind of like a dancing in front of you is like so very different thing. It's like, why the fuck is that thing happened? Okay, yeah. Then kind of like some people are kind of like doing a lot of creative stuff. Some people are kind of like simply doing things. It's a kind of like a somebody experience was somewhat something equivalent to a YouTube, but YouTube mostly kind of like a showcase a video. But in this Instagram, you are kind of like a connecting with the character. You are actually connecting with the kind of like a something the people who are kind of like uploading content on Instagram platform. You are kind of like something find out that this particular woman likes cats a lot. She kind of like upload a lot of photos with the cat, selfie with the cat, shot with the cat, or kind of like a status with the cats and things like that. Okay, yeah, and you are kind of like somebody know more about the people. It's kind of like a bit more kind of like some things. Then you kind of like went ahead, and suddenly Instagram is actually showing you kind of like some very naughty women. Okay, kind of like wearing half bikini and things, and kind of like somebody flash things like that, and you were kind of, oh my god. And the every experience is kind of like a really good and really great. Okay, it's kind of like a really good in first context, which kind of like somebody, oh fuck, that is kind of like a really fucked up things like that. Okay, yeah. It's really good. It's really great. There are kind of like a millions of people who are kind of like showing their millions of trillions of videos regarding about there and things and that. You don't know what should I supposed to do, but while you are kind of like watching those reels and photos, you are kind of like somebody addicted and things like that. You are kind of like scrolling. You are kind of like somebody looking at this and that and that. It's just like a, yeah. And after you spend almost like a 2-3 hour, you realize that, oh no, I should supposed to be get out. Then you get out from that particular block, and then suddenly there is a something kind of like a somebody black color of kind of like a somebody block is in front of you. Then you kind of like went inside, and suddenly there is a Twitter, sorry, X, not Twitter. Okay, Twitter, sorry, X. Okay, yeah. And then you went inside the X. It was kind of like people are kind of like tweeting like regarding about that blue bird is kind of like a somebody flying everywhere, and what the fuck is that? And this is that. It was kind of like a really good. Okay, I'm kind of like getting lot of kind of like tweets from lot of kind of like some very influential people like a prime minister of India or other people kind of like somebody saying some sort of stuff. And there is a kind of like a simply blue bird are kind of like a simply kind of like taking that message and kind of like putting into the wall and things and that, which is kind of like a really good, really great in this kind of like a context, which kind of like felt really good. Yeah. And and then what you have to do is that like basically Twitter is not really sorry, X is not kind of like that much addictive and things like that. You just kind of like spend just couple of minutes, you realize that there is nothing really there is a kind of like controversy actually happened. Like mostly Twitter are actually meant for controversy. People are kind of like shouting at each other, no, this is wrong, no, this is wrong, no, this is wrong, and this is wrong. People shouted about that like your government kind of like do something really wrong, and this and that and that and that, without talking any kind of like assembly fair conversation. They are just kind of like blaming each another and kind of like doing controversies and things and that. You were kind of like listening at that moment, and then you realize that it's a kind of like somebody, the two dogs are kind of like barking on each other. Why should I supposed to be waste my time to see them? Okay, yeah. So I just kind of like left that block, and then you are kind of like somebody see a kind of like a particular icon. Okay, yeah. Now this icon kind of like look like white with the red and things like that. And then you kind of like went inside, and suddenly you are into the Angry Bird. Okay, and then you start kind of like in the game, and there is a kind of like a big kind of like something massive poles with kind of like some rubber attached with it, and there are multiples of birds like a red, yellow, and multiple birds. And those birds are kind of like two birds are kind of like pulling them back, and one bird are kind of like inside that rubber and kind of like stretch them back and kind of like release them. And then suddenly that bird are kind of like going so rapidly to the kind of like a pig like a pig territory, and kind of like bring out that eggs and things and that, which kind of like feels really good. I also tried that thing, but it kind of like felt really, I try to jump, then I kind of like suddenly fall on my teeth and I broke my teeth probably. Okay, yeah. Oh, I don't know, it's kind of like a very weird experience. I don't really love it, and I kind of like escape from that kind of like a simply bubble. Okay, yeah. Then I kind of like a feel really good. I just feel like that. No, okay, yeah, I should supposed to be calming down here. Okay, and then there is a kind of like a some little bit greenish kind of like a some block is kind of like a scene in front of me. I'm not really sure what is exactly that green block. Okay, yeah, it kind of like a greenish, not that completely green, a kind of like a some a light green kind of like a things. And then I kind of like a went inside, and suddenly there is a WhatsApp. People are kind of like sending messages and things, and there are so many messages and things. So I was like, what the fuck is that? This is so many messages, like a almost like a billions of kind of like a message are actually going through and things. It was like, oh fuck, let me read this, let me read this, let me read this, let me read this, let me read this. But the there are so many messages are kind of like going so rapidly. It was a kind of like a somebody's thing. I cannot able to read that much. Okay, yeah, there are so many messages. It kind of like a somebody sometime personal, sometime kind of like a heartwarming, sometime kind of like a angry or things or that and that. Some people are kind of like sending their photos and things, which kind of like a somebody, yeah, it's a kind of like a bit more personal. I shouldn't supposed to be kind of like a listen their kind of like a message or read their photos or thing, or kind of like a somebody read their message or things, nothing really at all. So probably I just kind of like a leave that block. It's not really good for me. Okay, yeah. And then I wanted to kind of like simply sit there, and kind of like I decided that I will not gonna kind of like a went inside the kind of like a something any kind of like a block and things like that. But I realized that na ki after a couple of time I seen kind of like a couple of blocks are kind of like a not lit up. Like basically the every block I kind of like a went inside, those blocks are kind of like a lit up by the multiples of colors and things like that. But there are so many kind of like assembly blocks are not lit up. They don't really have lighting. They just kind of like assembly in black and white. I never really knew what exactly is this thing. And there is no sound is actually coming out. Like basically every block is kind of like a emitting some sort of sound. But after like there is a kind of like a black and white kind of like assembly blocks are kind of like not emitting that much sound. I was very much confused that what exactly is this kind of like assembly application that not lit up and things like that. I kind of like simply went ahead, and suddenly there is no sound at all. It completely darkness. Like there is little bit light, but kind of like a very little light. But the sound is almost equivalent to nothing at all. And it's kind of like a feel that the YouTube, Instagram, and WhatsApp are kind of like a screaming out so loudly that kind of like a came to me, came to me, came to me. But it's just like these blocks are kind of like a black and white. I never really know what exactly is this thing. Then I kind of like a suddenly seen a kind of like a suddenly a block. I am not really sure what exactly that. Okay, yeah. Okay, it's a kind of like assembly is this thing that block is kind of like assembly never been used for almost like a week, and it's that's why it's kind of like assembly black and white, and no one actually kind of like a use that kind of like a use that kind of like a block and things like that. I was not really sure what exactly that. Okay, I am bitterly curious regarding about what exactly is this block is actually about. Okay, yeah. Then I kind of like assembly went inside that thing, and then I kind of like went inside, and I suddenly found out that it's a kind of like a something a block is actually about a kind of like a something the a trash or things or delete item or stuff like that. Like when get inside that thing, I kind of like a fall down, and suddenly I fall down. I kind of like a realize that I am in that trash. Okay, yeah. There are so many kind of like so many messages and videos and audios or kind of like a things are deleted, and I was kind of like in between that particular trash mountain, and I was like, I never really sure what exactly is this thing. There is a kind of like a one light beam is kind of like a simply falling from upward, but rest of the kind of like a entire thing is kind of like a simply completely black and white. Okay, yeah, it's not really that key kind of like complete darkness. No, it's a little bit light up, but a kind of like a black and white. I was not really sure what exactly is this thing. And there is kind of like a only one timer is actually happening. That timer is kind of like a represent that 90 days. Okay, yeah, like basically after the 90 days, the entire kind of like a assembly space over there like kind of like a wipe out by the kind of like assembly something that kind of like a somebody machine that kind of like a sucks out that trash and kind of like a let that out and things like that. And I was so scared that if I kind of like a stay there for more than 90 days, I might not get out. Okay, yeah. So I'm kind of like a somebody doing a lot of things to how do I supposed to get out and things like that, but the chances are almost nothing really at all. I'm trying to do this thing, I'm trying to do, but nothing really at all. I seen there are a lot of kind of like some emojis, a lot of kind of like some messages and videos are kind of like things are kind of like stuck there. I also seen there is a porn videos too. I was not really sure why the fuck is porn video are actually here. Okay, yeah. But I'm kind of like suddenly very just frustrated. I don't know how do I supposed to do this thing. I was kind of like spending their days and things and that. Okay, that kind of like some 90 days to kind of like 80 days, 7 days, 70 days, 60 days, 40, 30, 10, and then kind of like there is only 1 day remaining for kind of like something that machine will gonna start and kind of like clear it out and wipe out the entire kind of like a trash. And I decided that I don't want to kind of like wipe out from the trash. So I realized that there is only kind of like a somebody the own cross kind of like a something, something that hook or kind of like a came down to kind of like a drop that trash and things like that. So I decided to grab that kind of like a simply hook. So I kind of like a went to the top of that particular mountain, and suddenly that hook is kind of like a put the bottom, it kind of like a throwing some sort of trash. I suddenly kind of like a grabbed that kind of like a hook and kind of like a went up. And when I kind of like a went up, I kind of like a get out from that kind of like a simply that black and white clear up icon. I was like realized that, oh my god, I kind of like a simply saved myself a lot. Okay, yeah. Probably. Oh my god, it's been I'm actually kind of like a thinking about this particular point of perspective for almost like a more than 20 minutes. Whatever. But this is what exactly happened if I kind of like a went inside the kind of like a internet was a physical thing and things and that, then this might be a kind of like a somebody's situation will gonna happen. Probably I didn't really kind of like explain regarding about the internet, but I kind of like explain about the kind of like a mobile screen. But internet would be a kind of like a same thing, like a basically there is multiples of kind of like application, but there are so many kind of like a sites are kind of like a somebody not visited, like a government sites or things like that. And the trash icon are kind of like a somewhat something equilateral to the kind of like a somebody dark web or things like that, which would be a kind of like a somewhat something, yeah, associate with the kind of like the internet or things like that. Whatever, it's just my thought process, it's a kind of like simply the creativity what I think about that. And yeah, all right, this is I should supposed to be end here. All right, and thank you.